Hines here from the Autoimmune Free Cooking Club and our Paleo family. And this week we're talking Thanksgiving. I'm showing you some of the Thanksgiving classics that I have remade into a paleo version, or I'm using grass-fed butter today, so that's technically primal, but I'll tell you how you can substitute to make that completely dairy-free. And there's a reflection in it that that spoon was dirty. We've made turkey. I showed you how to start with a whole fresh turkey and roast that, make the gravy. I showed you a turkey breast in the Instant Pot and German chocolate pecan pie. Today we're making the sweet potato casserole, and we're making it delicious without a bunch of added sugar. And I'm starting with real sweet potatoes. So here I have 4 organic sweet potatoes. Anything that grows in the ground, you really want to use organic if you can. And I baked them until they're done. Actually, I left and one of my children took them out of the oven, so hopefully they're done. When they're really good and completely cooked, the skins will just peel off like that. Sometimes you might get one that's a little bit stuck and you need to scoop it out. That's why I got out that spoon and fork. But generally, the skins will just peel right off. I baked these in a 400-degree oven, and it took a little over an hour. If you want to use a microwave, you can microwave them. If you're short on time, you can microwave for a few minutes and then finish them in the oven. I think the texture is better when they're roasted in the oven. So when I have time to do it, that's my preferred method. And also, you know, in the summer, when it's so hot out and I'm paying to air condition my house, I don't want to have my oven on 400 for an hour and a half. But in the fall, when Thanksgiving happens to fall, it's cool outside, I'm happy to turn my oven on and let that go for a while. So anyway, use your oven, use your microwave. If you can help it at all, don't buy the canned yams because they're in syrup, and we don't want that. We want to control all of our ingredients. And there's so much sugar in these anyway. My hands are so sticky just from peeling these guys. They're just so naturally sweet. So we really don't need to add a whole bunch of unnecessary sweetness. So you want about 3 cups of mashed sweet potato. You really don't have to measure. Like I said, I had 4 kind of average size sweet potatoes. You could very easily do a little bit more, do a little bit less. The topping ingredients are measured separately, so you could cut the topping ingredients in half. You could double them. I usually end up cutting the amount of pecans down because I have some people, you know, a lot of kids don't like nuts, so I'll do half of my pan without nuts, so I used fewer. Let me rinse off all the sticky. So I roasted these earlier, so they were done, and they're cool enough for me to touch. And I just mashed them with an old-fashioned kind of potato masher. If you want like a super smooth, creamy texture, then you'll want to run them through a food processor, something like that. Into my potatoes, I'm going to add, I have 2 tablespoons of butter for one thing and 5 for the other. 2 tablespoons go in the potatoes and 5 tablespoons go in the topping. Go ahead and put the butter in so the warmness, the heat of the potatoes will melt that butter. We're sweetening our potatoes with orange juice instead of adding a bunch of brown sugar. That's fine for now, and I'll get all the rest of my ingredients in. So I want the zest, the juice, and the pulp of, I said 2 oranges, but this guy is gigantic. This is what they had at my store. So I'm just going to do the 1. And if I need to add some juice from my carton, I got that out of the fridge. This is a microplane grater, It's one of my must-have kitchen tools. On the website, which is now it was Our Paleo Family. It'll still redirect you there if you go to ourpaleofamily.com. But it's Autoimmune Free Cooking Club right now. There is a menu. If you're looking on your computer, it's across the top. If you're on a mobile device, it may be like a drop-down menu. But it'll be resources and ingredients, and it lists some of the tools and things that I find kind of indispensable, and this is one of them. And this one is getting really old, and honestly, it's not as sharp as it was. So I probably need to ask for a new one of those for Christmas. Ooh, it smells so good. So I'm going to juice it. Let me show you what I meant by the juice and the pulp. I would love to know what you're making for Thanksgiving. If you have something that like your family always eats that is not traditional, you know, turkey, dressing, that kind of thing, I would love to know what it is. Curiosity. I heard a friend of mine, they have lasagna for Thanksgiving, which I think is awesome, you know. Whatever it is, I'm just curious. Obviously, I'm showing you how to make traditional American Thanksgiving favorites in a paleo way, because you can do it. You can get through the holiday without feeling bad physically or feeling like you just have to throw in the towel and eat the bad stuff. You know, you don't have to. There's a way to do it and keep your blood sugar under control and keep from feeling sick. So after you can probably see this very clearly, juiced my orange, I have all this pulp right here. So I'm going to get the juice in there and then just get all that pulp. I want that too. So I really want a half a cup of juice. I don't quite have that, so I'm going to pour some in from my carton. You may want your potatoes to be a little bit of a sort of looser texture. You can always add more. You can add more of the milk. So I have my oranges. I have 2 eggs. I'm going to add my eggs at the end so that I can taste my mixture. So I'm going to skip the eggs. A half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. There will be more cinnamon in the topping. A half a teaspoon of salt. This is a quarter. So even though it's a sweet dish, you want a little bit of salt. It'll help bring out some of that sweetness and just make it balanced. A teaspoon of vanilla. And a half a cup of coconut milk. So I talk about Thrive Market all the time. This is Thrive's brand of coconut milk. They didn't have, my favorite is Native Forest, and they didn't have it this time when I went to order. So this was really my only choice. I don't like the top. That was really hard to get open. I was afraid I was gonna hurt myself. So it does have a good amount of the cream at the top, which is good. And a half a cup of this. Okay, and just mash this together. You could use, like I said, you could put this in a blender, you could put it in a food processor, you could use a mixer, but I'm fine with the texture of it this way. You make it the way you want it to be, the way you're used to it. This one, I want to take that away, and I'm going to use a whisk just to get all of this blended in really well, and then I'll have my eggs too. So if your potatoes are super hot, like you just roasted them, you will probably want to crack your eggs into a separate bowl and beat them and temper them with your warm mixture a little bit before you add the eggs in, because you don't want to have scrambled eggs in your sweet potatoes. Tastes good to me. I love the fresh orange in there. If that's kind of a new idea to you, give it a try. I hope you like it. It's really tasty. Some people put a ton of eggs in their sweet potatoes, and you can put in more eggs. It'll just give it more of a custardy texture, which is fine. You know, it's not going to mess it up if you put in 3 eggs or even 4 instead of the 2. Like I said, it'll just make it more of that sort of souffle texture. So just beat these in. It's nice and smooth. It's so good. It's so good for you. So many good nutrients in the potatoes. I'm not wearing my apron, so I'm trying not to splatter it. Okay, so here's my pan that I greased with a little bit of avocado oil. This is not a 9 by 13, actually it's a 11 by 7. This volume would even fit in like a 9 by 9 pan if you wanted to do it that way. I like it rectangular because then you have more surface area for the yummy topping, and it's easier to, you know, you have more space to do just the nuts, no nuts. So we talked about Thanksgiving food traditions. I would love to know what your otherwise Thanksgiving traditions are. Like, do you play football? Do you watch the parade? Do you watch football? Do you do other stuff? What's the stuff that you do on Thanksgiving? It'd be fun to know. So I need 1/3 of a cup of maple syrup. Because this is just topping, you could leave any of this out. It would be totally fine. You hate nuts? Don't put in the nuts. Don't want it this sweet? Don't put in the maple syrup. It's totally fine. It will work just fine. Here's my 5 tablespoons of the grass-fed butter. I've just cubed it up. 2.5 tablespoons of coconut flour, so that's going to help it have that sort of, cakey is not the right word, but it's not just like runny, buttery. It has some body to it. And I don't think it tastes like coconut. And it's actually really sensitive to coconut or allergic. I was talking to somebody today whose daughter's allergic to coconut. You could substitute a different flour. You could substitute arrowroot, tapioca, almond flour. You could leave it out. It wouldn't mess it up at all if you left out the flour. That would be no problem. We want 1/2 teaspoon of salt in this part as well. I know, salt, trust me. 1/4 cup of coconut sugar, which, oh yeah, here it is. I didn't find it at first, so I got out my maple sugar, and then I found my coconut sugar. 1/4 cup, which coconut sugar to me is not very sweet, and 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. And a cup of chopped pecans, optional, which we love pecans, so I'm going to use the pecans. That's what my chopper here is for. Doesn't really matter exactly how many. We do want those chopped fairly small because it just makes it easier to eat when they're not super big. So I feel like I'm reaching. So then you just stir this up. You can use your spoon, spatula, fork. You could run this whole thing through your food processor if you wanted. I'm going to probably end up using my fingers. It'll be not super crumbly. Sometimes when you make a crumb topping like this, it's like a real dry crumb. This one is not because of the maple syrup in there. So I told you I was using coconut sugar. That's the way my recipe is written. You could also use maple sugar. That would be delicious. And as a last resort, if you don't have these specialty ingredients, you could certainly use good old-fashioned brown sugar. I'm just trying to smush that butter. Because my butter was out and softened, it's just mixing really easily with my spatula. And then you put this on top and you put it in the oven, again at 350, which my dressing also bakes at 350. And everything else that I put in the oven on Thanksgiving after my turkey, so I do my pies first thing, and then I do my turkey, and then the turkey is out and it's resting, and then all my side dishes go in. They all either need to bake at 350 or can bake at 350. So I only have one oven, so that works out perfectly. So we're going to put the topping on, and we're going to bake for about 30 minutes. Now, this is one of my Thanksgiving tricks. That I make this entirely the day before, like all the way. I don't bake it, but I get it completely done up to what I'm showing you right now. I have the topping on and everything. I'll cover it with plastic wrap and stick it in the refrigerator, and then I bake it on Thanksgiving Day. So this was a decent number of ingredients to get out. It makes a little bit of a mess, you know, with having to bake and then peel your sweet potatoes. So just make it the day before. It's completely fine. The only tips I would give you as far as making it ahead are you want to not put a glass dish, cold glass dish, in a hot oven. So if you're using a glass dish, make sure you put your cold pan in a cold oven instead of preheating your oven. My pan is at room temperature, so I can preheat my oven. But you don't want to put a cold pan in a hot oven, or your pan could crack, and then you would lose your potatoes. You would have a big mess to clean up on Thanksgiving Day with all those people watching, and it would be a big stressor. So bear that in mind. And also, it will take longer to bake if it's cold. Another way to combat that is to let it sit out for about a half an hour before you put it in the oven, but it'll still be colder than it would be if I'm just making it fresh now. So it's going to take a little bit longer to bake, probably about 45 minutes. The topping's going to melt down on there and kind of caramelize and be crispy, and it'll be all warm and bubbly underneath. Delicious. So I'm going to get that in the oven, and I'll show it to you when it's all done. So here's my sweet potato casserole out of the oven. We have this amazing crispy topping. So we have the nice crispy topping on top. It's creamy and warm, and sweet potato-y underneath. So good. I'm assuming it's so good. I haven't had it since last Thanksgiving, but this has been our recipe for a couple years. So okay, so that's it. That's our Thanksgiving sweet potato casserole. It's not too sweet, but it definitely has all of those elements, except marshmallows. If you're a sweet potato casserole with marshmallow person, we don't have any marshmallows here. But this topping with the pecans and the maple syrup and the cinnamon is delicious. And I would like to think that you would not miss your marshmallows, because it's so flavorful with the orange juice and the orange zest and the actual sweet potato mixture. So good. All right, so that's it for our Thanksgiving prep today. We still have cranberry relish to come. And then what do we do at the end of the week? I know a lot of people do Thanksgiving leftover recipes. I'm not a leftover person. So we're going to do, what do you eat when you're sick and tired of Thanksgiving and all the leftovers? I want to make something totally different. So don't forget to come back on day 5. All right, that's it. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.